Hello and welcome back. The last 3 chapters of my book, God Loves Children, will be read to you from the book itself because I have to do these word for word. They are not really the type of chapters that can be summarised, so I do apologise if I am constantly looking down at my sheet of paper and not looking straight at you, but it is more effective if I read these chapters from the actual book itself, word for word. However, if I do find that there are some words or some phrases that seem to be unnecessary, that I don't need to actually read out on camera, I will miss those out. However, the actual chapters in the book are very small. They're not very many pages. I mean, typed out on A4 paper, I have only got 2 full sides, 2.5 full sides, so it isn't that long. This chapter is entitled Teenage Years, Remember Charlie? And it does say at the top of the chapter that you will need to refer to the glossary. That is because I have mentioned some pop groups and some other things that were around in the 80s. Yes, I'm an 80s chick, that you may not understand because you are much younger than me, or because you come from a different country or culture to me and do not understand. So I'm going to start reading now, and I do hope that it will be interesting. It's not always easy for me to read things out word for word because I like to talk to you as if you're in the room and we're just having a conversation. Whereas with this chapter and the last 2, I'm kind of going to be a little bit more stilted and a little bit more robotic, I think. But I hope it's not too robotic, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay. Finally, I had one. My mum bought me a Harry. Now I was going to be one of the stylish 14-year-olds who possessed the coolest jacket of the decade. With its token red tartan lining and tight elasticated sleeves, I now had the pluck to swagger through the school gates with my head held high. Not any old Harrington would do. They had to be black. And wearers had to like pop groups such as The Specials, Madness, Bad Manners and UB40. In reality, ska music was a little bit too ethnic for me, and I secretly preferred the New Romantics. All my friends were white, so there were no black kids to hang out with and be tribal. Each time Red Red Wine was played in the lunchtime social rooms, kids expected me to begin dancing with my head, like Ali Campbell and crew did, which infuriated me. No, it was Hungry Like the Wolf and Don't You Want Me Baby and Vienna that got me moving. So to match the music genre a Harrington wearer was supposed to be into, I settled for Madness and bought an I Love Suggs badge, which I wore with pride on my trendy collar. I was being delusional, however, for my stylish jacket was accompanied by a calf-length pleated school skirt. Waist up, I was a modern teenager. Waist down, an old age pensioner. Skinny legs have never looked graceful under a pleated skirt, especially when it's almost down to your ankles. To top off this granny look, my mum had insisted that I wear ugly flat brown shoes that were a size too big for me. She had become exasperated that my footwear wore out too quickly. So in her frugal wisdom, she procured a pair of what could only be described as miniature boats. The soles curled up at both ends, which meant that when my feet were not inside them, they would rock from side to side at the slightest gust of wind. Worse still, female boy shoes didn't come into fashion until 9 years later. So my peers wore pretty feminine heels in all colours of the rainbow. No kid likes to be different. I had wanted to be like the others, and with my new outer garment, I had deceived myself into thinking that I was. The token-type miniskirt or drainpipe trousers, which were normally worn with Harringtons, graced the legs of every other female who possessed one. Theirs also smelt of cigarette smoke and rebellion. Being oblivious to this fashion faux pas, when I looked in the mirror, all I could see was my top half, and boy, didn't I look snazzy. Now, there's nothing like one of your peers to bring you down a peg or two, especially if it's a teenager, especially if it's at school, especially if it's a girl. One day I mustered the courage to take a quicker route to the science block. This meant passing the bicycle shed. The bell had not yet rung for the next lesson, so there was still a waft of smoke that could be seen rising from the top of the old brickwork. As I approached it, the tough brigade peered at me suspiciously through their nicotine fog and looked me up and down. I pondered on whether to give them a joyful "Watcha, mate?" that means hello, or to just walk past briskly. As most of the stairs remained in the down position, thus focusing on my lower half, I decided on the latter. My hideous boat shoes struggled to keep up with my stride and subsequently lolled off my heels as I dashed to class. Flip-flops would have been quicker to walk in, and suddenly the thought of my science lessons seemed very appealing. "Oi!" came a shout from behind. I grabbed a bubble gum from my pocket and turned up my collar as casually as possible. If only I had smothered on some more eyeliner during the break. That always made me feel more confident. But then that's what Jezebel did, and she was evil. "Oi, you!" I turned around, wishing that my gum wasn't still so sweet, as I needed to blow a big bubble to boost the tough nut image I was desperately trying to convey. "What?" I replied as dauntlessly as I could. The girls were still looking down at my legs. Smirks, grins and giggles were not welcome by me, but that's what I was getting. "Charlie's dead." Our eyes met. I was mortified and jealous at the same time. The cringe came from the fact that she was referring to my underwear. The jealousy was because her jaws had already been masticating gum for quite some time, and she blew an enormous bubble. "Thank you," I replied, and I giggled nervously. The phrase "Charlie's dead" dates back to when King Charles II died, and mourning women lowered their petticoats in respect, similar to flying a flag at half-mast. So when your petticoat or half-slit was showing from under your clothes, people would let you know by reminding you of King Chuck's demise. It was always done very loudly. In my school days, it was common for girls to wear half-slips, which were basically satin underskirts. There were even ones with slits to be worn with pencil skirts. I don't know why we ever wore them at school, for our skirts were never see-through, nor were they cold. And of course the wretched things would never stay where they were, but would ride down past your hem as if you'd forgotten to remove your nightie. As I glanced down, my offending garment was near my ankles. No amount of bubble blowing would make me look cool now. I made a feeble attempt at singing one of my favourite songs. Pop, the coveted gum. My mocker glared at me expressionless while flicking her tongue out to retrieve the pink mess that was stuck on her top lip. "He's still dead," she said, chewing slowly. Sure enough, it was still hanging beneath my skirt hem, and it took several adjustments before it disappeared. It was too late to avoid ridicule. As I dashed off to class, I could hear chants of "Charlie, Charlie, Charlie" in high-pitched voices. I am so glad that half-slips have gone out of fashion, together with its irritating phrase. Sayings come and go. We often hear the older generation complaining that words have lost their original meaning. Sick, gay, wicked being just a few. Well, God means what he says, and his promises last forever. And what brought consolation and reassurance years ago still do today. He says in his Bible, his word, "The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of the Lord endures forever." That's found in 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 24 to 25. And I've also written down here Isaiah 40 verse 8, so I'm not sure if they're both the same. I'll have to go and check. Well, Charlie died along with the saying, and thankfully, when people have droopy garments now, nobody shouts out Charlie's dead. In fact, people don't really have droopy garments because nobody wears half slips. What a relief. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, eBay, that's probably the place where you can find half slips. Probably the only place. You really do not want to be wearing an extra thing under your skirt. Anyway, I'm glad that in a time of turmoil and chaos, I can trust God when he says do not fear, because his words never fail. He means it. I don't need to bite my fingernails or grow a stomach ulcer in worry. If he says do not fear, there's no reason to fear, because he has everything under control if we trust in him. Yes, I am so glad that the Bible lasts forever, and the words that come out of God's mouth never fail. Thank you for listening to that story. I apologise if it was a bit stilted at times. Like I said, I don't think I'm the best book reader. I'm not the best audio reader, audio, what do you call it? Audio book reader. I don't think that's my calling. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story, and I hope you have got some funny stories about things that happened to you when you were a teenager at school. I hope they weren't all awful stories. I hope there are some funny things that you can look back on. Please let me know in the comments below what your favourite teenage memories are at school, and if there's any naughty things that you got up to. And for those of you that can remember a Bible verse that means a lot to you, a Bible verse that you know has been with you throughout your growing years and into your adulthood, and has stayed with you and comforted you and encouraged you, please share that with me and the others that have watched this video, so that we can be encouraged too. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and until then, may God bless you. Have a good week. Take care. Goodbye.